Your religions are not based on love. They are based on pure, calculated fear. You think you are worshipping God, but the truth is, you are just trembling before death. Your churches, your mosques, your temples, they are nothing but insurance offices against hell. If you are afraid of hell, you are already controlled. You are already a spiritual slave. Drop this armor of belief, because a man who lives in fear will never know what truth is. Hello, my beloved friends. Have you ever sat quietly in the darkness of your room and wondered why you truly pray? Have you ever asked yourself why you go to the temple, why you kneel in the church, why you cry out to a sky that remains completely silent? If you look deeply into your actions, you will find something very startling. God is not really the center of religious inquiry. Death is. Without death, there would have been no religion at all on this earth. It is the presence of death that makes man seek and search for the beyond, for that which is deathless. Look at the animals. Animals are not religious for the simple reason that they are not aware of death. They cannot conceive of themselves dying, although they see other animals dying around them. It requires a tremendous quantum leap of consciousness from seeing somebody else dying to concluding that you are also going to die. Animals are not so alert, not so aware to come to such a radical conclusion. And if you look closely at the majority of human beings, they also live a subhuman existence. A man becomes truly mature only when he has arrived at this absolute conclusion. If death is happening to everybody else, then I cannot be an exception. Once this conclusion sinks deep into your heart, your life can never remain the same again. You cannot remain attached to life in the old, foolish way. If it is going to be taken away from you at any moment, what is the point of being so possessive? If all your wealth, your power, your relationships are going to disappear one day, why cling to them and suffer? If life is not going to remain forever, then why live in such misery, such anguish, such worry? If it is going to go, it is going to go. It does not matter when it goes today, tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow. The fundamental truth is that life is going to slip out of your hands. The day you become aware that you are going to die, that your death is an absolute certainty, you face the only real certainty in life. Nothing else is so absolutely certain. Yet, somehow, we go on avoiding this central question. We keep ourselves occupied with trivia, with mundane matters, with wealth, with political power. Sometimes we even talk about great things, God, heaven, and hell, just to avoid the real question. The real question is not God. It cannot be, because what acquaintance have you got with God? What do you know about Him? How can you inquire about something that is absolutely unknown to you? it will be an empty inquiry, a juvenile curiosity, childish and stupid. Stupid people ask about God, but the intelligent person asks about death. The people who go on asking about God never find God, but the person who asks about death is bound to find God. It is death that transforms you. It changes your entire vision. Your consciousness becomes sharpened because you have raised a real question, an authentic question, the most important question of existence. You have created such a great challenge for yourself that you cannot remain asleep for long. You will have to wake up. You will have to be alert enough to encounter the reality of death. This is exactly how Gautam Buddha's inquiry began. The day Buddha was born, he was the only son of an old king. There was great rejoicing in the kingdom because the people loved their king deeply. He had served them with compassion, making his kingdom one of the richest and loveliest of those days. The people had prayed long for a successor, and Buddha was born in the king's very old age. His birth was unexpected, a beautiful surprise. The king named him Siddhartha, which means fulfillment, because his deepest desire had been fulfilled. This son made the king's life feel completely significant. All the great astrologers of the kingdom gathered to predict the future of this child. They all agreed on two alternatives, raising two fingers. They said that either this boy would become a world ruler, a world emperor, or he would renounce the world completely and become a Buddha, an enlightened one. But there was one young astrologer named Kodanna who raised only one finger. The king asked him to speak clearly, without symbols. Kodanna said he was absolutely certain that the boy would renounce the world and become an awakened one. The king was not happy with Kodanna because truth is very difficult to accept. He ignored the young astrologer entirely. Truth is rarely rewarded in this world. On the contrary, it is punished in 1,001 ways. The king asked the other astrologers how he could prevent his son from renouncing the world. He did not want his son to be a beggar, a sannyasin. He wanted him to be an emperor. This is the ambition of all parents. Who wants their child to move into the mountains to seek the inner self? Our desires are extroverted, and the king was an ordinary man with ordinary ambitions. The astrologers told the king that the solution was simple: give the boy as much pleasure as possible, keep him in absolute comfort and luxury, and never allow him to know about illness, old age, and particularly death. If he never comes to know about death, he will never renounce the world. The astrologers were right in a way, because death is the central question. Once it arises in your heart, your entire lifestyle is bound to shift. You cannot go on living in the old, foolish way. If this life is going to end in death, then this life cannot be real. It must be an illusion, a beautiful lie. Truth has to be eternal. Only lies are momentary. If life is momentary, it must be rooted in ignorance. The king made all arrangements to protect his son from the truth. He built 3 distinct palaces for Siddhartha for the different seasons, so that the boy would never feel even the discomfort of the weather. No old man or woman was allowed to enter his palaces. Only the young and beautiful surrounded him. He gathered the loveliest young women of the kingdom so that Siddhartha would remain caught in dreams, allured and fascinated. A sweet dream world was created for him. Even the gardeners were commanded to work through the night to remove dead leaves and fading, withering flowers. The king was afraid that if Siddhartha saw a dead leaf, he might ask what had happened to it, and the question of death would arise. Seeing a withering rose, he might start meditating on the transience of life. For 29 years, Siddhartha was kept absolutely unaware of death. But how long can you avoid the central facts of existence? Death is too important a phenomenon to be hidden forever. You cannot deceive someone indefinitely. As the king grew older, Siddhartha had to be allowed out into the city to see the ways of the world. Whenever he passed through the streets, the old, the beggars, and the sick were carefully removed. No monk was allowed to cross his path, because seeing a sannyasin dressed in orange, looking detached and silent, the prince might ask uncomfortable questions. But one day, the truth could no longer be avoided. Before we look at that fateful day, I want to ask you to consider your own life. If you feel a resonance with these words, if you feel that your inner journey is calling you to wake up from your illusions, take a moment to interact with this channel. If you find value in these insights and wish to support this work of spreading consciousness to a world that is deeply asleep, click the join button on your screen to become a member of our community. You can also express your gratitude and support the continuation of these teachings by using the Super Thanks feature, or by exploring our collection of ebooks available for your deeper study. Let this be your active participation in this silent revolution. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know what fears you are ready to drop. You see, we are all doing exactly what Buddha's father did. If a death procession passes by on the street, a mother pulls her child inside the house and closes the door. Parents do not want their children to know about death because they are afraid of the questions that will follow. We build our cemeteries outside the towns so that nobody has to see them. Death is a central fact. The cemetery should be built exactly in the middle of the city so that everybody has to pass it many times a day. Going to the office, coming home, going to school, you should be reminded again and again of your mortality, but we hide it. In the West particularly, death has become the last taboo. Once sex was the taboo, now death is the taboo. We need someone to bring death back into the world, to expose people to its reality. When a person dies in the West, his body is decorated, bathed, perfumed, and painted by experts. If you look at the corpse, it looks far more alive than the person ever looked when they were alive. The cheeks are painted red, the face is bright, and the person seems to be fast asleep in a calm, quiet space. This is nothing but self-deception. We are not deceiving the dead person. They are no longer there. It is just a corpse. We are deceiving ourselves by making death look beautiful, carrying the body in a costly car, arranging a great procession, and praising the person. They were never appreciated when they were alive, but the moment they die, everybody praises them. We live in the illusion that it is always the other person who dies. It is a very comforting logical conclusion. You will never see your own death. You will always see others dying. So obviously, it is always the other who dies. You seem to be the exceptional one. God must have made a different rule for you. But remember, nobody is an exception. There is only one eternal law that rules all of existence. Whatsoever happens to the ant is going to happen to the elephant, and whatsoever happens to the beggar is going to happen to the emperor. Death is a great equalizer. It takes no notice of who you are, how much money you have, or how famous you are. One evening, Siddhartha was on his way to inaugurate the yearly youth festival. The streets were decorated, and the youth of the kingdom had gathered to dance and sing. On the way, the prince came across the very things his father had spent 29 years hiding from him. First, he saw an ill man, coughing, trembling, and weak. He had never seen illness before. He asked his charioteer what had happened to this man. The story says that the charioteer wanted to lie, but an enlightened, disembodied soul took possession of his tongue and forced him to speak the truth. The charioteer said, "This man is ill." Siddhartha immediately asked the intelligent question, "Can I also become ill?" The charioteer again tried to deny it, but the soul of truth forced him to say, "Yes, Prince, you are also going to be ill." Then they moved further and came across an old man, bent over, wrinkled, walking with a stick. Siddhartha asked the same question and received the same truth. Finally, they came across a dead body being carried to the cremation grounds, surrounded by weeping relatives. Siddhartha was shocked. He asked, "Am I also going to die one day?" The charioteer said, "Yes, sir, nobody is an exception. Sorry to say so, but even you are going to die." Siddhartha immediately commanded the charioteer to turn the chariot back. He said, "Then there is no point in going to a youth festival. I have already become ill. I have already become old. I am already on the verge of death. If one day I am going to die, then what is the point of all this nonsense living and waiting for death? Before it comes, I would like to know something that never dies. I will devote my whole life to the search for the deathless." As they were turning back, they saw a fourth sight. A sannyasin, a monk dressed in orange, walking very meditatively with immense peace in his eyes. Siddhartha asked who this man was, and the charioteer said, "Sir, this man has also seen death happening, and he has gone in search of the deathless. That very night, Buddha left his palace, his beautiful wife, his newborn child, and all his luxuries. He renounced the world in search of that which is eternal. Those who accept the challenge of death are immensely rewarded. But we prefer the cheap safety of belief. If you believe in something, you will disbelieve too. Nobody can believe without disbelieving. Every belief is nothing but a cover-up for your inner doubt. The doubt hurts like a wound. It makes you feel your inner emptiness and your inner ignorance. You want to hide it. But hiding your wound behind a beautiful rose flower is not going to help it disappear. Sooner or later, the rose flower will start stinking of the wound. The wound will not disappear because of the flower. The flower will disappear because of the wound. You may be able to deceive your neighbors who look at you from the outside and see only the rose flower, but how can you deceive yourself? Deep down, you know that the wound exists and that your belief is arbitrary. It has not grown within you. You have plucked it from the outside, from your parents, from your priests, from your holy books. A child brings natural doubt within him. He inquires, he questions everything. Doubt is an inner potential. It is the only way the child can explore and seek truth. Nothing is wrong with it. But your priests have been telling you a lie for centuries. They tell you that doubt is a sin. Doubt is innocent. Doubt is beautiful. Doubt is natural. But because the priests have condemned it down the ages, that which could have become a beautiful flowering of trust has become a stinking wound. My teaching is that the first step is to drop all your beliefs. Let them be dropped. They are all rubbish. Trust in your doubt. See the beauty of questioning. And don't be in a hurry to stuff your mind with borrowed answers from the outside. Out of authentic doubt, someday, the flower of authentic trust will grow. It will be an inner growth, not an imposition from the outside. That is the fundamental difference between belief and trust. Trust grows inside your subjectivity, while belief is forced upon you from the outside. Don't believe in God. Don't believe in the soul. Don't believe in the afterlife. Trust your doubt and question everything. Question all the Buddhas. Question me. Because if something is true, it is not afraid of your questioning. If it is true, it will survive all your doubts. And out of that survival, authentic trust will be born. Doubt is a way of groping in the darkness, but the door exists. If you sit in your dark corner, believing in somebody else's description of the door, you will never find it yourself. Why do you believe in Jesus? You have never seen him. If you had been in the crowd 2000 years ago when he was being crucified, you might have been among those who were spitting on his face. Because human nature has not changed. We have better roads, better technology, we have landed on the moon, but the human mind remains exactly the same. You believe in Jesus today, after 2000 years, only because you are afraid of death. And his story contains the phenomenon of resurrection, the idea that a man died and came back after 3 days, defeating death. Christianity became the greatest religion in the world because it caters to your fear of death. Buddhism could not become that great because to believe in Buddha requires immense guts. Buddha says, I teach you total death. He is not satisfied with this small physical death because you will just be born again in another womb. He teaches annihilation, the ultimate disappearance, so that you dissolve into existence and not even a trace of your separate ego is left behind. In India, Buddhism completely disappeared because people do not want truth. They want consolation. They want sweet lies that protect their ego from the fear of death. People want a savior, a messiah who can eat for them, chew for them, and digest for them. But if I eat food, your hunger is not going to be satisfied. Nobody can save you except yourself. I don't want believers here. I want seekers. Believers are the most mediocre, least intelligent people in the world. Forget about belief. It only creates schizophrenia within you. If you start believing in me, immediately disbelief will arise from the back door, because I am not here to fulfill your expectations. I live in my own way, authentically, and I don't consider anyone else's expectations. The moment you consider others, you become phony. George Gurdjieff used to tell his disciples a fundamental truth. Don't consider others, otherwise you will never grow. But look at the world, everybody is considering others. What will my mother think? What will my father think? What will society think? Even parents are afraid of what their children will think. If you go on compromising to please everyone around you, you commit a slow psychological suicide. It is said that people die at the age of 30 and are buried at the age of 70. I think 30 is too late. People die much earlier, around the age of 21, when the state recognizes them as citizens and gives them the right to vote. That is the moment the national mechanism is certain that your intelligence has been safely destroyed. You are no longer wild, no longer raw, no longer dangerous. You have been successfully adjusted to the herd. You are no longer a man. You are just a civilized citizen. Be wise and cut the very root of this phoniness. Don't enter the trap of belief, and then the duality of doubt and disbelief will never divide your being. The crowd does not care about truth. It cares only about consolation and comfort. It wants sweet lies that allow it to relax without any effort. The last time I visited my hometown was in 1970. One of my old school teachers, with whom I had a beautiful, loving relationship, was on his deathbed. When I arrived at his house, his son met me at the door and pleaded with me, "Please, don't disturb him. He is on the verge of death. He loves you and has been remembering you, but we know that your very presence will shatter all his consolations. At the moment of death, don't do this to him." I pushed the son aside and went in. If it were not the moment of death, I might have listened to his advice, but death is the ultimate testing ground. If a man can drop his lies and consolations even a single moment before he dies, his death acquires a value far greater than his entire life had. The old man opened his eyes, smiled at me, and said, "I was remembering you, but I was also afraid. I knew that your coming would be dangerous for my comfort." I told him, "It is certainly going to be dangerous, and I have come at the exact right time. I want to take away all your consolations before you leave this shore. If you can die in innocence, your death will become a beautiful crescendo. Put aside your knowledge, because it is all borrowed. Put aside your God, because it is nothing but a projection of your fear and your greed. Put aside the idea of heaven and hell. They are just your psychological armor. For your whole life you have clung to these illusions. Now, at the moment of death, gather your courage. You have absolutely nothing to lose. A dying man cannot lose anything. Death is going to shatter everything anyway. It is far better that you drop your consolations by your own hand and die in innocence, full of wonder and inquiry." The old man closed his eyes and said, "I will try my best." His family was furious with me. They were Orthodox Brahmins and could not believe I was stripping a dying man of his religious beliefs. But the shock of death was so intense that it shattered all his illusions. In life, you can go on believing in paper boats, but when you face the vast, roaring ocean of death, you realize that a paper boat cannot help you swim. It is far better to know that you have no boat, that you have to swim on your own strength. Clinging to a false belief prevents you from learning how to swim, and instead of taking you to the further shore, it becomes the very cause of your drowning. The old man opened his eyes after a few moments, smiled beautifully, and said, "It is unfortunate that I never listened to you before. I am feeling so light, so unburdened, so fearless. I am full of curiosity to see what the mystery of death is." He died with that beautiful smile remaining on his face. The mind functions exactly like a machine, continuously rolling down the tracks of its past conditioning. It does not know how to respond to the freshness of the present moment. It only knows how to react out of the dead archives of its memory. And because you are so deeply identified with this mechanical mind, you live your entire existence as a robot, completely unaware of your own inner center. You look at the world through the colored glasses of your past prejudices, and you distort everything that enters your vision. This mechanical nature is the very soil in which all your psychological fears take root. Have you ever observed your fears closely? If you look at them with empty eyes, without any judgment or condemnation, you will find that fear is as non-substantial as your shadow. The shadow exists, it is negative, it is non-substantial, but it is not non-existential. If you are walking through a dark, lonely jungle at night, you can become absolutely terrified of your own shadow. Your running away will be real. Your perspiration will be real. Your racing heartbeat will be real, but the cause behind it remains completely non-substantial. You can run away from a piece of rope in the dark, screaming that it is a deadly snake. If you turn back, bring a light, and look closely at the rope, you will simply laugh at your own stupidity. But people are terrified to look closely at the spaces where their fear exists. They are more afraid of fear itself than of anything else, because the very shivering of fear shakes their foundational illusion of safety. After a terrifying nightmare, when you suddenly wake up in your bed, the after effects still persist in your body. Your breathing is heavy, you are perspiring, and your limbs are still trembling. Intellectually, you now know it was just a dream, a non-substantial projection of the sleeping mind, but that knowing takes time to penetrate to the very guts of your being. Meanwhile, the physical hangover of that non-substantial nightmare continues to rule you. Your whole life has become such a nightmare because it is entirely governed by fear. And what is this fear actually made of? It is made of a deep, profound ignorance of your own true self. There are 1,001 manifestations of fear. But if you dig down to the very bedrock, you will find only one basic fear: the tacit, existential suspicion that deep inside, I may not be. And in a very beautiful way, it is absolutely true that you are not. The separate I, the ego that you cling to so desperately, is a total fiction. Godliness is, the universe is, but you as a separate entity do not exist. The host is absent, only the guest is present. But because your intuitive suspicion is completely valid, you are terrified to look inward. You know that if you look within, the ego will pop like a soap bubble. So you keep pretending, you go on looking outward, gathering money, chasing status, running after power, just to keep the illusion intact that I am. This false I amness is the root cause of all human paranoia. You manage it somehow by keeping your gaze firmly fixed on the outside world, because you know that any deep, authentic encounter will shatter your fragile house of cards. It can be shattered by a serious disease. It can be shattered by seeing a dead body carried to the cremation ground. And it can be shattered completely by a deep experience of love. I am reminded of my old friend, Mullah Nasruddin, who was once traveling on a crowded train. The ticket collector came into the compartment and asked him for his ticket. Nasruddin immediately became nervous. He looked into his coat pockets. He looked into his shirt pockets. He opened his suitcases and scattered his clothes all over the seat, but the ticket was nowhere to be found. He was perspiring profusely, trembling with an intense fear. The ticket collector looked at him with compassion and said, "Mullah, look, you have searched everywhere, but you have not looked in that small pocket on the right side of your vest. Why don't you look in it?" Mullah Nasruddin screamed in absolute terror, "Please, don't talk about that pocket. I am not going to touch it. I am not going to look in it. That pocket is my only remaining hope. If I look in that particular pocket and the ticket is not found there either, then it is absolutely lost. Then it is nowhere to be found in the universe. I will look everywhere else in the train, but I will not touch that pocket. It is my only safety, because as long as I don't look, I can still live in the hope that perhaps the ticket is hidden there." This is the exact situation of the human ego. You don't look inward because that inner space is your final vest pocket. You cling to the outer world, hoping against hope that your identity is real, because your deepest intuition whispers to you that if you look inside, you will find nothingness. You will find that the separate you does not exist at all. And because you are terrified of this empty space, you become afraid of everything that has the potential to throw you back into yourself. You become afraid of great beauty, because a beautiful sunset with its luminous colors has the power to suddenly stop your mind in absolute awe. For a single moment, the mechanical spinning of your thoughts comes to a dead halt, the inner chatter ceases, and you are thrown instantly into your own interiority. People are afraid of great music. They are afraid of profound poetry, and above all, they are terrified of deep intimacy. That is why your love affairs are just hit and run games. You don't want to go deep into each other's being, because if you allow someone to come close, their pool of being will function as a mirror, and in that silent mirror of the other's soul, your true face will be reflected. If the mirror remains empty, if it reflects nothing of your pretenses, if it shows that the separate you is just a ghost, then what will you do? To escape this terrifying realization, humanity has created false substitutes for everything. You play political and social games in the name of love. In the name of meditation, you practice new systems of concentrated thinking, chanting mantras over and over again, which is nothing but a mechanical device to keep your mind occupied so that you can avoid true emptiness. Your prayers in the churches, your rituals in the temples, your repetitions of holy scriptures are all sophisticated armor designed by a cunning mind to avoid true meditation. True meditation happens only when the mind is completely non-functional, when you are not doing anything at all, when you simply are. In that pure isness, the ego disappears, and when the ego disappears, the shadow of fear evaporates instantly. If you feel the truth of these words penetrating your armor, if you understand that the mechanical routine of your life must be broken, look at the screen right now. To support this communion, to help this message reach the far corners of a sleeping world, click the join button and become an active member of our spiritual family. Your presence here is an energetic contribution to this silent revolution. You see, the ego lives in a constant, chronic state of time neurosis. It is always looking toward the future because it knows that its existence is temporary and that one day it will have to disappear completely in death. The basic fear is always the fear of death. All your other small fears are just minor reflections of this fundamental trauma. And the supreme beauty of reality is that death is just as non-substantial and fictional as the ego itself. Fear is simply the imaginary bridge that you have built between these two non-existential fictions, the ego and death. Fear has no power of its own. Its only power comes from your willingness to believe in it, from your cowardice to look directly into your inner sky. Your inner being is nothing but an empty sky. The sky is completely empty, yet it is this very emptiness that holds the entire universe, the sun, the moon, the stars, the planets, the earth. It is the background of all that exists. Clouds come and go. Stars are born and explode into nothingness, but the sky remains untouched, untarnished, and unscarred. In exactly the same way, your inner sky is a pure witness, a silent watcher, completely unaffected by the storms of life and death. Meditation is nothing but the rediscovery of this inner sky. If you examine the history of the human mind, you will find three distinct expressions of death. The first expression belongs to the ordinary, gross man who lives entirely identified with his physical body. His whole existence has been centered around the primitive pleasures of food and sex. He has lived exclusively in the porch of his palace, never entering the inner treasure chambers, believing that the porch is all that life has to offer. At the final moment of death, this man feels an immense, agonizing terror. He tries to cling to the body. He fights death with all his might, and because he resists, death appears to him as a dark, devilish, ugly enemy. In almost all primitive societies, the messenger of death is depicted as an ugly, dark monster sitting on a ferocious beast. This man misses the golden opportunity completely because his whole life was spent in a spiritual stupor. Then there is a second type of expression which belongs to the poets, the philosophers, and the thinkers. They have cultivated a little sophistication of the soul. They have known pleasures beyond the grossness of the physical body. They have played with ideas, with classical music, with literature and art. They look at death and say that it is nothing bad, nothing evil. It is simply a great, restful sleep after a long, exhausting journey. This view is certainly better than the first, but it is still far away from the ultimate truth. They are viewing death through the filter of intellectual comfort. The third expression belongs to the mystics, to those who have penetrated into the deepest core of life. They declare that death is of the divine. It is not merely a restful sleep, but a glorious resurrection, a new beginning, the opening of a golden gate. When the Sufi mystic Bayazid was breathing his last, his disciples gathered around his bed and were suddenly struck with absolute awe. In that final moment, Bayazid's face became powerfully radiant, surrounded by a luminous aura of pure light. They wept and said, "Master, give us your final message before you leave us." Bayazid opened his eyes, smiled with an exquisite ecstasy, and whispered, "God is welcoming me. I am stepping into His divine embrace. Goodbye." The moment his breathing stopped, there was a literal explosion of light in the room, which then slowly dissolved into the silent air. When you have known the transcendental within yourself, death ceases to be an enemy. It becomes the beautiful, radiant face of the divine itself. You must understand a very deep truth. The phenomenon of death, as you see it in the world, is nothing but a social illusion. You see a man lying motionless, his breathing stopped, and you pronounce him dead. But since you yourself are not dead, you have absolutely no right to make such a positive, dogmatic assertion. All you are qualified to say is a negative statement. Up to yesterday, this man was walking, talking, and eating. Today he is no longer doing those things. The life that I knew from the outside is no longer visible. To say anything more than this is to cross the boundaries of truth. No one in the crowd surrounding a corpse has ever witnessed the actual act of dying. They have only witnessed the cessation of external movements. A man who has lived his entire life identified with visible acts, earning money, building houses, making friends, fighting enemies, finds all of these things slipping through his fingers at the moment of death. These were merely objects seen in the light of the inner consciousness, just as physical things are seen when a lamp is lit in a room. At the final hour, because he sees these outer activities disappearing, and because he has been deeply brainwashed by the social illusion that man dies, he concludes that he is dying. This social illusion operates on him as an intense, hypnotic spell. He sees his wife weeping bitterly. He sees his children in tears. He sees the doctor standing by with oxygen cylinders, looking completely helpless. The entire atmosphere of the house becomes heavily charged with grief and panic. This ideal hypnotic situation completely grips his mechanical mind. The people around him cast a powerful spell on him, convincing him that his end has arrived. Overcome with a terrifying horror, he shrinks within himself, shuts his eyes, and falls into total unconsciousness. Falling unconscious is a natural defense mechanism that the mind uses against unbearable pain and terror. If you have an extreme, excruciating stomachache, your mind will automatically turn off its switch and you will lose consciousness. It is a trick to escape the suffering. You only feel pain as long as it is bearable. The moment it crosses the threshold of your endurance, you are gone. You are unconscious. If someone tells you they are experiencing unbearable pain while talking to you, they are lying, because if the pain were truly unbearable, they would be flat on the floor, completely unconscious. If a minor physical illness can cause us to lose consciousness out of fear, imagine the terrifying impact of the thought of absolute annihilation. The very idea of death kills your awareness. You fall into a deep, dark stupor, and in that state of total unconsciousness, the physical connection breaks. This is why I call death a social illusion. It is a hypnotic condition that we cultivate in every child from the moment of birth. We indoctrinate children with the symptoms of death, so when those symptoms appear in their own bodies later in life, they mechanically close their eyes and lose consciousness. Diametrically opposed to this mechanical dropping into darkness is the ancient technique of active meditation known in Tibet as Bardo. Bardo is a highly scientific method of providing an anti-hypnotic suggestion to a dying person. When a man is about to leave his body in Tibet, there is no weeping, no wailing, no mourning allowed in the room. The relatives sit in silent meditation, and a village monk or priest sits close to the dying man's ear, giving him powerful anti-hypnotic suggestions. He tells him, "Listen truly, you are not dying, because no one has ever died in the history of existence. You are separate from this body. Watch the entire process with full awareness. Do not fall into the trap of the social illusion." The monk gently narrates the entire physical contraction as the consciousness slowly withdraws from the extremities. He tells him, "Now your life energy is leaving your legs. Now it has left your hands. Now your tongue can no longer move yet. You still are. You are the silent watcher of this entire withdrawal." This anti-hypnotic suggestion prevents the mind from shrinking in terror and allows the person to depart from the physical vessel in a state of absolute, crystal clear awareness. The day humanity develops a healthy, meditative attitude toward existence, there will be no need for Bardo, because everyone will live so consciously that they will naturally die consciously. I recall a beautiful story of an old Zen master who was about to die. He gathered all his disciples around him and asked, "My time has come to leave this world, but I feel it is utterly boring to die the way everyone else dies, lying down in a bed. It has no fun in it. Tell me, have you ever seen a master die while walking?" The disciples pondered and said, "Master, we have never seen anyone do it, but we have heard an old legend of a certain mystic who died while taking a walk." The master smiled and said, "All right, forget about walking. Have you ever seen or heard of any mystic dying while standing on his head?" The disciples were shocked and said, "No, Master, we have never even dreamed or conceived of such a ridiculous thing. It is absolutely impossible to die standing on your head." The master laughed merrily and said, "Excellent. That is exactly the way I shall do it." He immediately tossed his robe aside, stood upside down on his head, and within a few seconds he died. The crowd of disciples was thrown into absolute panic. The sight of an ordinary corpse is scary enough, but a dead body stiffened upside down, standing on its head, was a terrifying nightmare. He was a dangerous man throughout his life, and even in his death, he had played a bizarre trick on them. Nobody dared to touch the body. They didn't know how to lay a corpse on a funeral bier when it was standing on its head. Someone suggested calling his elder sister, who was an old nun living in a nearby monastery. She was 90 years old, a very sharp and non-nonsense woman who had always set him right when he was a mischievous little boy. The sister was brought to the room, and when she saw her brother dead, standing on his head, she became extremely annoyed. She struck her heavy wooden staff hard on the floor and shouted, "You mischievous brat! You have been a nuisance your whole life, playing tricks on everyone, and even at the moment of death, you cannot behave properly. Stop this naughtiness immediately. If you have to die, die like a civilized man." To the utter amazement of everyone present, the master suddenly came down from the headstand, laughed out loud, and said, "I was just having a little fun to see what you idiots would do. All right, now I shall lie down and die in the conventional way." He promptly lay down on his back, closed his eyes, and passed away peacefully. The old sister turned around, walked out of the room, and said to the disciples, "Now that is more like it. You can dispose of his body now. Whatever you do in life or death, do it properly." This story is immensely significant. It shows that for a man of awareness, death is not a tragedy. It is not an emergency. It is just a playful game. If you have had even a tiny glimpse of meditation, if you have felt even for a single moment that you are separate from your physical body, your identification is shattered. And once that identification is broken, you cannot be hypnotized by the social illusion of death. You will remain wide awake when the physical connection loosens and breaks. Death turns out to be nothing more than a loosening of an association, a changing of old tattered clothes for new ones. The separation of the body and the consciousness is called death, but because you remain a witness to this separation, the question of your death never arises. You will see that what you called life up to yesterday was merely an temporary association. Now that association has completed its utility and a new journey is beginning. But remember, it is possible to die in this state of supreme awareness only if you have learned the art of living with awareness. Dying is a phenomenon of life. It does not occur outside of life. It is exactly like a tree that bears fruit. First, the fruit is green, hard, and clings tightly to the branch. Slowly, as the juices flow, it ripens, turning yellow and sweet. A moment comes when it becomes so totally ripe that it simply falls from the tree of its own accord. That falling from the tree is not an isolated event happening outside the ripening process. It is the eventual, beautiful fulfillment of the yellowing itself. The falling is the culmination of everything the fruit went through while it was green, while it was blossoming, and even when it was hidden as a potential within the seed. Death is the final fruit of your life's ripening process. It is the crowning peak, the ultimate crescendo. But look at the tragic way humanity has split reality into two hostile camps, East and West. Up to now, both cultures have developed in a lopsided, unbalanced, and neurotic way. We have not yet been able to create a whole, holy, and total human culture. In the West right now, sex is given total freedom, but death is completely suppressed. Nobody wants to talk about death. Everybody is obsessed with sex. A vast, morbid literature of pornography exists. Magazines like Playboy are published everywhere, neurotic, obsessive, and ill. But the moment you mention death, people look at you as if you are morbid and sick. Their motto is, eat, drink, and be merry, and keep death locked out of the conversation. In the East, exactly the opposite neurosis has happened. Sex has been totally suppressed, but death is talked about freely and continuously. Just as the West has sexual pornography, the East has created a terrifying pornography of death. Almost all Indian scriptures are full of this death pornography, which is as obscene and morbid as the sexual variety. Your so-called Mahatmas and Sadhus in the East go on talking about death from morning to evening. They hint at it continuously to create fear in your heart so that you become dependent on them. If a young man falls in love with a beautiful woman, the Eastern Mahatma will immediately jump up and say, "What are you doing, you fool? What is a woman? She is nothing but a leather bag of skin, and inside her are all kinds of dirty things." They seem to take a strange, perverted joy in describing the mucus, the blood, the flesh, the excreta in the stomach, and the urine in the bladder. They say, "This is your beautiful woman, a bag of dirt, and you are falling in love with her. Be alert. She will soon become an old, wrinkled hag, and then she will die and you will weep and suffer." Look at the bizarre parallel. In the West, when they want to show you that life is beautiful, they bring in the body of a woman, the plastic, digitally retouched girls of Playboy who don't even exist in reality. In the East, when they want to show you that life is dirty and transient, they again bring in the body of a woman, describing her internal organs with graphic disgust. Both the playboys of the West and the Mahatmas of the East are obsessively fixated on the body of the woman. They are both sick, both unbalanced. Whenever a society suppresses sex, it becomes expressive about death, and whenever a society suppresses death, it becomes neurotically obsessed with sex. This happens because sex and death are not two separate forces. They are the two polarities of the exact same cosmic energy. Sex represents the beginning of life, and death represents the end of it. To the ordinary, logical mind, they appear to be contradictory, so the mind tries to manage the tension by remembering one and completely forgetting the other. But they cohere together. They are the yin and yang of existence. If you have ever been alert during the highest peak of sexual orgasm, you must have felt a sudden, fleeting tremor of fear, a shadow of death. At the absolute zenith of orgasm, life and death meet and merge into one experience. You feel life at its ultimate peak, and you simultaneously feel death at its deepest depth. That is why people both crave orgasm and are terrified of it. They avoid moving totally into it because death opens its mouth in that very moment. A man of awareness accepts both with an open heart. He does not create a lopsided culture. He knows that each moment he is both life and death. And in that understanding, he transcends the duality completely. It is only when you become aware of death as an absolute reality that a life of true self-discipline becomes possible. If you close your eyes to death, your life will be nothing but a shallow indulgence, a frantic running around to squeeze pleasure out of things before time runs out. Animals have no self-discipline and no meditation because they have no awareness of death. They live entirely in the moment of immediate physical survival. But when a human being becomes aware that death is an absolute certainty, he starts rethinking his entire way of living. He wants death to be beautifully absorbed into his life. And when death is absorbed into life, a natural, unforced self-discipline is born. You move, you enjoy, you love, but the remembrance of death is always present as a silent, beautiful shadow, giving depth and perspective to your consciousness. Your river of life needs both banks to flow, the bank of life and the bank of death, and the stream of your consciousness flows beautifully between them. If you try to deny the bank of death, you are trying to flow with only one bank, which is an impossibility. Your life will remain superficial, flat, and shallow. And if you move to the other extreme, as the East has done, living with death continuously in fear, praying and doing rituals just to become immortal, you stop living altogether. That too is an obsession, a tragic way of existing. The West is a tragedy and the East is a tragedy because a total, balanced life has not yet been allowed to exist on this earth. Is it possible for you to love deeply, to enjoy a beautiful sex life, knowing fully well that you are going to die and your beloved is going to die? If you can do that, you become complete. A deep contentment descends upon you, and you attain a fulfillment that lacks nothing. In the East, many secret disciplines were developed in the past to know the exact date and time of one's death beforehand. Western psychologists look at this and call it abnormal, a kind of sick morbidity. They say, "Why think about death? Avoid it." But death has already happened in your birth, so you cannot avoid it. Birth is already in the past. You cannot undo it. Death is yet to happen in the future, so it is the only event you can actually do something about. The founder of yoga, Patanjali, states that the exact hour, minute, and second of your death can be known beforehand through specific bioenergetic indicators. If you know exactly when the guest is arriving, you can prepare yourself to receive death as a great, noble guest, not as an enemy. It is a rare opportunity to pass through an extraordinary gateway. If you can die alert, conscious, and full of joy, you will never enter another womb again. Your lessons in this earthly school will be complete, but 99% of human beings die in total unconsciousness because they are so full of anxiety and terror that they mechanically put themselves to sleep when death knocks. Approximately 9 months before a person dies, if they spent 9 months in their mother's womb, something subtle clicks in their hara, the navel center. Just as it took exactly 9 months in the womb to prepare for birth, the body requires exactly 9 months of subtle internal preparation to complete the circle and dissolve back into the source. Those who are deeply meditative immediately feel that something has changed in their navel center. There are other physical portents. Exactly 6 months before death, a man slowly becomes incapable of seeing the tip of his own nose. This happens because the eye muscles lose their tone and the eyeballs begin their slow, returning journey. Turning slightly upward in the final moment of death, they turn completely upward, but the process begins 6 months earlier. When a child is born, it takes about 6 months for its eyes to become fixed. Before that, they are loose and can move independently. The exact amount of time it took for the child's eyes to become fixed after birth will be mirrored before death as the eyes become loose again. Yogis who continuously practice concentrating on the tip of their nose can immediately detect when death is approaching because the nose tip disappears from their vision. According to yoga physiology, there are 7 energy centers in man, starting from the genital organs up to the Sahasrara at the top of the head. The center through which you leave the body indicates the exact level of your spiritual growth in this life. Ordinarily, 99% of people die through their sex center because their entire lives were spent revolving around sexual fantasies, sexual desires, and physical indulgence. If you have evolved beyond gross sex, if you have known true love and compassion, you will leave the body through the heart center. And if you have become a fully awakened master, a siddha, your life energy will be released through the Sahasrara, the crown center at the top of the head. In India, it is a traditional ritual that when a body is burning on the funeral pyre, the son takes a heavy staff and cracks the skull open. This is merely a dead, symbolic ritual. If a man has attained ultimate freedom, his skull cracks open on its own strength because the entire reservoir of his life energy rushes upward and explodes through the Sahasrara. The ritual is just a helpless hope performed for ordinary people who died through their lower centers. A specific energetic activity begins at the top of the head 3 days before a conscious man dies. When Western medical science expands its vision to include this sacred yoga physiology, it will become an essential part of every post-mortem to report exactly which center the person died from. It can be seen clearly in the energy structure of the body because the specific center breaks open like an eggshell when the life force departs. If you know these indications, you can prepare yourself for a great celebration, an ecstatic dance of departure. You will have learned everything that this world of matter had to teach you. You will be ready to be absorbed into the unlimited life of the cosmos. You will have earned your freedom. To understand the divine is to understand the absolute futility of all your serious attitudes toward existence. True religion cannot exist where seriousness dominates, because seriousness is nothing but a shadow cast by your trembling ego. If you look at the vast landscape of what humanity calls religion, you will find a very deep and dark sickness. All so-called religions that you see established on the earth are not based on love. They are not based on a genuine, ecstatic gratitude for life. They are deeply and explicitly based on fear. Their God is nothing but fear personified, and their concepts of heaven and hell are nothing but clear, distorted projections of human greed and human fear. You go to the church, you go to the temple, you kneel down before a stone statue or an invisible entity, not because your heart is overflowing with the song of life, but because you are scared to death. You are terrified that when this physical body drops away, You will be thrown into a dark, bottomless pit, or you will be punished for your so-called sins by a furious, jealous deity. The priest uses this existential fear to exploit you, to keep you tethered to the collective organization, because a man who is fearless can never be manipulated into a herd. The moment you feel guilty, you are a slave. The priest creates a massive, complicated system of belief to patch up your inner doubt, but a patched up doubt remains a festering wound beneath the beautiful rose flower of your belief. Why are you so terrified of death that you must manufacture these comforting fairy tales about a personal God who will save you? It is because you have not lived yet. Your life is full of unfinished business. When you wish for something you do not have, when your mind is constantly projecting desires into the tomorrow, that desire will continue to trouble your consciousness as long as it remains unfulfilled. And when death approaches, a man who has lived 80 or 100 years starts trembling and crying out, just like the ancient king Yayati, who pleaded with death for another 100 years, because his desires were still as hungry and unsatisfied as they were when he was 16. It is these very incomplete and unfulfilled desires that shout at you at the moment of your departure, demanding that you return. No external entity or vengeful God sends you back into this world. You return here on your own accord because of the magnetic pull of your own unlived life. You travel over the fragile bridge of your unfulfilled longings. You enter another womb and you repeat the exact same mechanical routine all over again. The death that leads to another birth is an incomplete, immature death, a death that is not fully ripe. Wisdom does not go hand in hand with gray hair. Wisdom is attained only when your desires grow old and crumble into nothingness, leaving you completely content in the present moment. When you feel this deep thirst to move beyond your past conditionings and support the awakening of human consciousness, it becomes a natural sharing of energy. True love and sharing mean there is no hoarding, no greed. If you find value in this silent revolution of consciousness, if you feel this message lighting up the dark corners of your inner world, consider actively participating in this work. You can choose to use the join feature on your screen to become an essential pillar of our meditative space, or express your deep gratitude through super thanks as a beautiful, spontaneous, energetic exchange. Our compiled ebooks are also available as tools to guide you deeper into your inner sky, allowing you to explore these dimensions at your own leisure. Share this vibration with those you love. Leave your insights in the comments below and subscribe to this flow of awareness so we can walk into the unknown together without any fear. Dying is an art, and it is the ultimate test of how you have lived your life. If your roots are rotten, the fruit cannot be sweet. To prepare yourself to enter death in a fully conscious state, you must first learn how to enter your daily pain and suffering consciously. Death comes only once, and there can be no physical rehearsal for it. But pain and misery come to your door every single day. Seekers and meditators have always welcomed suffering, not because they are masochists who enjoy self-torture, but because suffering provides an incredible opportunity for self-preparation and disidentification from the physical body. Ordinarily, when pain arrives, your immediate reaction is to escape from it. You take an aspirin, you drink alcohol, you rush to a movie theater, or you drown yourself in mechanical prayers and devotional hymns. These are all secular and religious strategies designed to forget your pain. But if you try to forget your misery, how can you ever wake up to it? To become aware of something, you must remember it. You must look at it face to face from your deepest interiority, without any defense. When a physical pain occurs, close your eyes and look at it from within. You have always known your body from the outside, as others see it. If you see your hand, it is from the outside, but you can feel your hand rising from the interior space of your consciousness. Pain is like a small flame of a lamp located inside a specific section of your body, but because you are identified with the outer skin, you experience the radiated light as if the pain is spread out over a huge, terrifying area. Close your eyes, relax your body, and try to locate the exact epicenter of the pain. As you look closely, without any judgment, without saying this is bad or this should not be, a miraculous phenomenon happens. The pain begins to shrink. It becomes highly concentrated, pinpointed. And as you continue to watch that tiny pinpoint of pain, a clear separation happens between the pain and the watcher. You realize with an absolute certainty that the pain is happening elsewhere at a distance, and you are merely the knowing consciousness, the mirror reflecting it. Once your identity with the body is severed in moments of suffering, the unconsciousness caused by pain ceases to exist, and you realize you are not the body. This is the foundational preparation for encountering death wide awake. This brings us to the very center of why intimacy creates such a deep fear in you. It is because when somebody comes close to you, your false, decorated persona is immediately threatened. You are afraid that they will see past your beautiful smile, your sophisticated words, and your mask of respectability, and look directly into your inner emptiness. You are terrified of your own emptiness because you have never tasted its nectar through meditation. You have been conditioned by a blind society to hate your own natural being, to feel constantly guilty, and to live behind rigid, protective walls. But when two emptinesses, two zeros, meet and overlap, a spiritual orgasm happens. Physical objects occupy space and can only touch superficially. Thoughts occupy psychological space and can only intertwine like liquid. Only when two zeros merge in absolute nothingness do they become truly one with each other and with the entire cosmos. All your ideas of logic and reasoning will take you only as far as the door of the temple, but it is only the presence of the divine that lets you in. We tried reasoning our way to him, and it didn't work. But the moment we gave up, no obstacle remained. God introduces himself to us out of kindness. For how else could we have known him? But how will you ever know him as long as you are unable to know yourself? Once one is one, no more, no less. Error begins with duality. Unity knows no error. The road yourself must journey on lies in polishing the mirror of your heart. It is not by rebellion and discord that the heart's mirror is polished free of the rust of hypocrisy and unbelief. Your mirror is polished by your certitude, by the unalloyed purity of your faith. Break free from the chains you have forged about yourself, for you will be free when you are free of clay. The body is dark, the heart is shining bright. The body is mere compost, the heart a blooming garden. You have been made for work, and a robe of honor awaits you. So how is it that you are satisfied with mere rags? How will you ever have riches if you are idle 60 days a month? The man of real meditation lives a double life. 30 days he lives in the outside world, and 30 days he lives within his own silent core. Knowing what you know, be serene also, like a mountain, and do not be distressed by misfortune. Knowledge without serenity is an unlit candle. Together they are a honeycomb. Honey without wax is a noble thing. Wax without honey is only fit for burning. Leave this abode of birth and decay. Leave this pit and make for your destined home. This heap of dust is a mirage where fire seems like water. Belief and unbelief both have their origin in your hypocrite's heart, because both are attempts to avoid the direct, immediate experience of reality. The way is only long because you delay to start on it. One single step would bring you to him. Become a slave to the whole, and you will be a king. The dumb find tongues when the scent of life reaches them from his soul. Listen truly, and don't be fooled. This is not for fools. All these different shades become one color in the jar of unity. The rope becomes slender when reduced to a single strand. Your intellect is just a hodgepodge of guesswork and thought, limping over the face of the earth. Wherever thoughts are, he is not. They are contained within his creation. and the part can never grasp the whole through logic. Whatever you assert about his nature, you are bound to be out of your depth, like a blind man trying to describe the appearance of his own mother, while reason is still tracking down the secret. You end your quest on the open field of love. The path consists in neither words nor deeds. Only desolation can come from these, and never any lasting edifice. Sweetness and life are the words of the man who treads this road in silence. When he speaks, it is not from ignorance, and when he is silent, it is not from sloth. To live a life of response instead of reaction means you must drop all your ready-made programs. Your mind functions as an old gramophone record, repeating the same histories over and over again, histories which do not exist anymore. You are carrying a massive graveyard of the past in your head, and because of that dead weight, you are missing the immense, throbbing beauty of the present moment. When you are angry, you do not look at the anger as a natural flow of energy. You immediately judge it based on your past conditionings. You either express it and create a chain of misery, or you repress it and accumulate poison in your body-mind system. The third approach, the approach of all the awakened ones, is neither to express nor to repress, but simply to watch. Sit silently, let the cloud of anger or fear surround you, and look into it with absolute awareness. You are the watcher on the hill, far beyond the storm, finding no cooperation from your side, seeing that you are unavailable to pour your energy into it. The anger or the fear will dissipate and disappear into nothingness. And that disappearance will leave you fresher, younger, and more innocent than you have ever been before. We are all waves in the same ocean, and the wave is never separate from the vastness that creates it. Your fear of being alone arises only because you have taken your separate personality to be your true reality. In total solitude, when all the props given to you by society are taken away, your false ego begins to feel suffocated. It feels as if it is dying, and a great trembling takes hold of your body. Let it happen. If trembling comes, tremble. Don't try to hide your fear behind a mantra or a prayer, because that is nothing but a psychological whistle to distract your mind from the darkness. Allow the fear to be. Let it pass through you completely, and when the cyclone has gone, you will find yourself centered as you never were before. You will realize that the death of the ego was nothing but a magnificent door to your own immortality. You have never been born, and you can never die. You belong to the eternal sky, and the body is just a temporary house you have chosen for the night. True love is not an attachment born out of fear. True love is an overflowing luxury of your own integrated being. When you are happy with your aloneness, when your inner emptiness has become a song of celebration through meditation, you no longer look at the other as a need. You don't use the other to escape from yourself. You don't reduce the other to a thing or a possession. You can simply say to the other, "I do not need you. I love you." This love is creative, this love is divine, because it allows the other absolute freedom while remaining completely at home within itself. Do not pay any attention to fear, because attention feeds the negative. Turn your face toward love, turn your face toward meditation, and let the small candle of your inner enthusiasm burn brightly every morning. Live each ordinary day as a sacrament. Eat your breakfast as if you are feeding the divine. Take your bath as if you are washing a temple, and you will see that all your psychological paralyzing fears will disappear on their own accord. You will become anear like the flowing river, dancing joyously toward the uncharted ocean of eternity. To understand this inner alchemy is to recognize that your fear is not something to be avoided, but the very door through which your freedom will enter. If you look at your conditioning from childhood, you will find that society has systematically used fear as a weapon to cripple your natural intelligence. A child is born utterly fearless, full of a natural, innocent curiosity about everything that surrounds him. He can play with a snake, he can touch fire, he has no conception of death or danger because he lives completely in the immediate present. But the moment the parents see the child moving freely, their own fear arises. They start imposing boundaries. They start creating conditionings. Don't touch this. Don't go into the dark. Don't do that. Behave yourself. They think they are protecting the child, but in reality, they are injecting a slow, chronic poison into his delicate consciousness. They are creating a psychological armor of fear that will follow the child for his entire life. By the time the child grows up, he has completely lost his roots in his own natural being. He has become an artificial mechanism, a robot that only knows how to move according to the ready-made programs given to him by others. This is the very root of your psychological fear. You are afraid because you are carrying a mind that is entirely borrowed from others. It is not your own authentic reality. It is just a tape recorder playing the voices of your mother, your father, your teachers, your priests. And because you are deeply identified with this mechanical mind, you are constantly trembling inside. You know that your identity is fragile, that any sudden crisis can shatter it into pieces. To keep this illusion intact, you go on creating more and more defenses around yourself. You accumulate wealth, you marry for safety, you join political parties, you become a member of a church. These are all sophisticated ways to find security in a world that is inherently insecure. But the more secure you try to become, the more dead you are. You are trying to find absolute safety, but absolute safety is possible only in a grave. If you are alive, you have to accept the beautiful, roaring insecurity of life. In my discourses on the Sufi mystic Hakim Sanai, in the great book Unio Mystica, I have always reminded my people of a fundamental maxim: do not move because of fear. If you look at the way humanity lives, you will find that almost all human actions are motivated by fear. You go to your office because of fear, the fear of poverty, the fear of starvation, the fear of losing your status. You get married because of fear, the fear of loneliness, the fear of being left alone in your old age. And above all, you pray and worship God because of fear. Your religious institutions are completely built upon this basic human paranoia. The priest tells you to fear God. He tells you that if you do not follow his specific commandments, you will burn in the eternal fire of hell. What kind of religion can arise out of fear? Fear is the absolute antithesis of freedom, and fear is the absolute enemy of love. If your prayer is born out of fear, it is not a prayer at all. It is just a business transaction with an invisible dictator. It is nothing but a frantic effort to save your separate ego from absolute annihilation. If you feel a deep, passionate resonance with these truths, if you understand that it is time to drop your heavy armor and step into the vertical dimension of pure awareness, let this space be your spiritual refuge. To actively participate in this work, to help this message of freedom and love reach a world that is deeply suffering, take a moment to look at your screen. You can choose to use the join feature to become an essential member of our meditative community, providing the energetic support needed to keep this light burning. You can also express your heartfelt gratitude through super thanks, creating a beautiful, spontaneous exchange of energy that keeps our message independent and vital. For those who wish to study these dimensions at their own pace, our compiled collection of ebooks is available as an invaluable guide for your inner voyage. Let us know in the comments what insights have touched your heart today. Share this video with those who are ready to wake up, and subscribe to this continuous near of consciousness. The true religious person does not move because of fear. He moves because of love. He moves because of pure joy. Jalaluddin Rumi used to say to his dervishes, "Move within, but don't move the way fear makes you move. Move the way love makes you move. Move the way a child runs after a colorful butterfly. Why be so serious about your spiritual search? Seriousness is nothing but the ego trying to look important. Make your religion a playfulness, a beautiful dance, a deep, silent celebration. When you go inward without any fear, without asking for any reward, and without being worried about any punishment, a magnificent space opens up within you. That space is your inner sky, an infinite expanse of pure consciousness that knows no limits, no boundaries, no past, and no future. To touch that inner sky is to know that you are immortal, that you have always been here, and you will always be here, long after this physical body has returned to the clay from which it came. To help you experience this inner sky directly, I have given many scientific techniques of meditation, because just talking about truth will not help you transform. You need an existential taste, a direct penetration behind your bones. One of the most effective methods is the Nada Brahma meditation, a beautiful method based on humming. When you sit silently with closed eyes and begin to hum deeply from your throat, your entire brain cells, your entire nervous system starts vibrating with a profound harmony. Ordinarily, your body moves in one direction and your mind moves in a completely separate direction, creating a deep split, a chronic schizophrenia within you. You are torn apart by these two hostile forces. But when you are fully engrossed in the humming, the body and the mind fall into a perfect tune for the first time. And when the body and the mind are together, you, the third element, the soul, the witnessing consciousness, can easily slip out through the back door. You can stand outside and watch the beautiful rhythm that is happening between the mind and the body. This is the literal meaning of the word ecstasy. To stand outside, you become a silent watcher on the hill, completely at ease, surrounded by a peace that passes all understanding. Another powerful technique is the Om meditation, which you can practice every night before falling asleep. Sit on your bed in the darkness, close your eyes, and exhale deeply through your mouth with the sound O. Go on creating the sound until your stomach goes completely in and all the air has left your lungs. When no more exhalation is possible, stop for a single precious moment. Do not inhale, do not exhale, just stop. In that absolute stopping of the breath, time disappears completely, because time moves only with the rhythm of your breathing. When there is no breath, you are just like a dead man. The entire process of existence stops with you. In that tiny, stopped moment, you are the divine. You are not doing anything. Your ego is not needed. Your mind cannot function. You simply watch that profound silence from your deepest center. Then, relax your hold and let the body take the inhalation through the nose on its own accord. You don't make any effort to inhale. You simply remain a witness, watching the body pull the air back in. When the inhalation is full, Stop for a single moment again and watch. These two stopped moments are the two faces of the ultimate reality. The stopping after complete exhalation is the magnificent silence of death. The stopping after complete inhalation is the ultimate peak of life energy. By watching both of these moments every single night, you transcend both life and death. You realize that you are the third element, the witness who is neither born nor dies, who is merely watching the biological mechanism breathe itself. Your entire sleep will be transformed into a deep, luminous meditation. And when you wake up in the morning, you will feel an upsurge of such incredible vitality, such fresh juice, that you will feel blessed enough to bless the entire universe. You can also practice the blue light meditation right before falling asleep. Lie down on your back, put the light off, and create a deep, intense feeling within yourself that you are dying. Relax every pore of your body until you feel that you cannot even move a finger because the body is a complete corpse. Through this simple experience, you will find that as the body stiffs and becomes like a dead log, your inner awareness becomes more alive, more luminous than ever before. When the body is dead, the mind automatically drops its thinking because all thoughts are deeply associated with physical survival. Within a few weeks of this practice, you will find that the moment you feel you are dying, all thoughts drop away, and you are left with nothing but a pure, radiant awareness. You will see a small, beautiful blue flame right near your third eye center, a luminous blue light that is the purest form of life energy. Fall asleep holding that blue flame in your awareness, and your entire night will become a sacred space of transformation. You will wake up knowing with an absolute existential certainty that death is a total illusion, that nobody has ever died and nobody can ever die. The fear of death is simply the fear of an unlived life. If you live each moment of your existence with such intensity, such totality, that nothing remains incomplete, fear cannot visit you at all. Live your emotions completely. If sadness comes, don't try to escape from it. Don't try to force a phony smile on your face. Sit with your sadness. Listen to its deep, heart-rending song. Happiness is always shallow. Sadness has a magnificent depth, like the innermost heart of an ocean. In sadness, you are thrown back into your own solitude, left entirely with yourself. Accept it, taste it, become one with it, and you will be surprised to find that hidden behind the sadness is an exquisite, unearthly joy. And when happiness comes, dance it, sing it, share it overflowingly, without any clinging, knowing well that it will pass away, just as the morning dew disappears when the sun rises. Do not make fearlessness a goal, because a goal is always a projection of the mind into the future, and the future is where all your anxieties live. Bring your mind back to the body. Bring your consciousness back to this very moment. When you are eating your food, simply eat. When you are walking on the road, simply walk. Above all, don't wobble. Let each small, ordinary action become an act of deep worship, a silent meditation. The word enthusiasm is one of the most beautiful words in existence. The basic root means filled with godliness. Live your life with pure enthusiasm. Wake up every morning with a great, clear promise to yourself that today you are going to live intensely, proudly, and beautifully, without any fear of the unknown. And when you go to bed at night, remember all the lovely moments that happened throughout the day, and let your consciousness dissolve into that gratitude. You don't need any personal God to save you. You don't need any comfort of a false belief. Your own witnessing consciousness is the only light, the only truth, the only immortality that exists. Drop your armor, trust your inner voice, and let yourself float effortlessly like a dry leaf on the roaring river of existence, until you disappear completely into the infinite ocean of the divine. And this oceanic flow is not something separate from you, because you are not an island. You have never been an island, and there is no spatial possibility for you to exist cut off from the vast, roaring whole. Your separation is nothing but an imaginary boundary created by your deep sleep, a hypnotic state where you have forgotten the original rhythm of existence. You carry the fear of this vastness within your very guts, because your mechanical mind continuously whispers that if you drop your controls, you will simply dissolve and be no more. But this fear is nothing but a shadow, a completely non-substantial hallucination that dominates your entire lifestyle only because you refuse to look at it directly with empty eyes. There is a beautiful Zen story about a man who was walking along a steep, rocky path in the absolute darkness of the night. The night was pitch black, the winds were howling, and suddenly the man slipped over the edge of the path. In his panic, knowing that just beside the path was a terrifying, bottomless valley that dropped down for thousands of feet, he frantically reached out his hands and grabbed hold of an overhanging branch of a wild tree. He hung there in the darkness, suspended over what his mind imagined to be a deep, horrific abyss. He shouted for help, he screamed into the night, but there was nobody to hear his call, and only his own lonely shout echoed back from the dark mountains. You can easily imagine the absolute torture that this man went through during that long night. Every single moment was a nightmare of death below him. His hands were becoming freezing cold, his muscles were aching, his fingers were losing their grip, and his entire body was trembling with an excruciating panic. He prayed to his gods, he thought of his family, and he collected every ounce of his remaining strength just to hold on to that branch for one more minute, one more second, postponing the terrifying fall into the void. He suffered 1,000 deaths in his imagination during those few hours of darkness. And then, slowly, the sun began to rise over the eastern horizon. The dark shadows started to dissipate, and light began to filter through the trees. The man opened his eyes, gathered the courage to look down into the bottomless abyss below his hanging body, and suddenly he burst into an uncontrollable, mad laughter. There was no abyss at all. Just 6 inches below his dangling feet, there was a solid rock ledge. He could have rested the entire night. He could have slept perfectly well, because the ledge was big enough and safe enough to hold him. But instead, his own mind had transformed the entire night into an agonizing nightmare of death and destruction. From my own personal experience, I can say this to you with absolute authority. Your psychological fear is never more than 6 inches deep. It has no more substance than that bottomless abyss imagined by the hanging man. Now it is entirely up to you whether you want to go on clinging to the tattered branch of your ego, turning your entire existence into a chronic nightmare of anxiety, or whether you would love to simply leave the branch, relax your fingers, and stand firmly on your own feet on the solid rock of reality. There is absolutely nothing to fear in this universe, because you cannot lose anything that is real, and that which is unreal is not worth saving anyway. But the human mind is so deeply addicted to its own suffering, so invested in its own defense mechanisms, that it prefers to sit on the shore of the ocean and construct intricate, complicated philosophical theories rather than taking a plunge into the water. I am reminded of an anecdote that the mystic Ramakrishna loved to repeat to his disciples. Once it happened that a great spiritual festival was being celebrated on a beautiful beach right by the side of a roaring, infinite ocean. Thousands of people had gathered from all over the country, and as they sat on the sand looking at the vast waters, a great intellectual debate broke out among the scholars and the theologians. They raised an abstract philosophical question: is this ocean truly immeasurable, or can it be measured by human intellect? Is it completely unfathomable, or is there a bottom to it that can be reached and mapped by our logic? The scholars brought out their ancient scriptures, The logicians created complex arguments, and the debate became very heated and noisy. By chance, a small statue completely made of salt was also standing there on the beach, listening to the entire discussion. Seeing the futility of their words, the salt man stepped forward and said, "Please, stop this noisy argumentation. You can go on discussing this for centuries, and you will never arrive at a true conclusion, because words cannot measure the depth of the sea. You wait here on the shore and continue your debate. I am going into the ocean myself to find out the truth. Because how can anyone know the reality of the sea unless they enter into it?" The salt man walked down the beach and jumped into the roaring waves of the ocean. Hours passed by, days passed by, then months passed by, and the salt man did not return to the shore. Slowly, the scholars and the crowds became tired of waiting, and they returned to their homes. They never received an answer from the salt man. And what actually happened to the salt man? The very moment he entered the ocean, he began to melt, because he was made of the exact same substance as the sea. As he walked deeper and deeper into the water, he dissolved more and more, and by the time he reached the absolute bottom of the ocean, he was no more. He came to know the ultimate depth. He became the very depth of the ocean, but he could not return to the shore to report his knowledge. He became the experience itself. We are all men of salt as far as this infinite ocean of life and death is concerned. We are made of the exact same cosmic stuff, and the moment we step inside, we are bound to dissolve completely. This is the ultimate fear of the mind. It wants to know the ocean, but it wants to remain on the shore as a separate knower, so that it can brag about its knowledge. The mind is terrified of true silence, terrified of true meditation, because it knows that entering into the vertical depth means total dissolution, fana, the absolute evaporation of the separate ego. So the mind stays on the safe, dry sand, playing with empty words, constructing dogmas, and repeating borrowed formulas, because that keeps the illusion of the I alive. If you look closely at your language, you will find that your very words are designed to create a false duality where only a continuous process exists. Language divides everything into a doer and a deed, into a subject and an object. We say the river is flowing, but Buddha says there is no river separate from the flowing. The river is nothing but a continuous process of rivering. If you take the movement out of the river, will there be any river left behind? It will disappear instantly. We say lightning is flashing in the sky, as if there is an entity called lightning which is performing an action called flashing. But in reality, there is only flashing. There is no entity behind it. The duality is brought in purely by our linguistic patterns, and then we apply the same false logic to our inner world. We say, "I am thinking," assuming that there is a static entity called I, which is separate from the thoughts, an entity which is producing the thinking. But if you sit in deep meditation and let your thoughts slow down and disappear, you will be absolutely amazed to discover that when thinking goes, the thinker disappears with it. The thinker was nothing but a collective name given to the rapid, mechanical movement of thoughts, just as a fan moving at a tremendous velocity creates the illusion of a solid, static circle. There is no thinker within you. There is only a continuous stream of thinking. There is no walker. There is only walking. There is no eater. There is only eating. Life is not a collection of static nouns. Life is a magnificent, ever-flowing verb. But because we live in a language structure that divides reality into static things, we become completely blind to the eternal flow of existence. We look at our physical body and think, it is the same body we had when we were children, but the physiologists tell us that the body is in a constant flux, changing its cells completely every 7 years. You are 10 times a totally different body if you live to be 70 years old. But because the replacement happens so slowly and subtly, you remain under the illusion that you are the same physical entity. The body is a continuum, a flame that appears static only because the replacement of energy is happening with a tremendous modern velocity. When you realize that your body and your mind are nothing but processes, changing from moment to moment like a candle flame, the question of death undergoes a radical mutation. Who is there to die? What is there to be destroyed? Only that which is static can be destroyed. That which is already a continuous movement cannot be stopped. Death is merely a change of the form, a loosening of a temporary association, a moment where the invisible traveler drops the old, worn-out clothes and steps into a new vehicle to continue the eternal pilgrimage. But you are so identified with the dust that has collected on your clothes that you scream in agony when the clothes are taken away. Imagine a traveler who has been walking on a dusty road for many miles. Naturally, much dust collects on his clothes, on his skin, on his face. If the traveler gets so confused that he starts thinking, "This dust is me, this dirt is my authentic identity," then he will be terrified of taking a bath. He will think that washing away the dust means his own destruction, his own death. This is exactly what you are doing with your ego. The ego is nothing but the psychological dust that your mind has accumulated from the past through experiences, through memories, through conditionings, through respectability. It is just dust collected on your consciousness. Death is nothing but a beautiful, natural, cosmic bath that unburdens you of all this accumulated garbage, so that your mirror becomes completely clean and clear again. But because you think you are the dust, you fight death with an intense panic. I am reminded of a beautiful story about a blind philosopher who lived during the times of Gautam Buddha. He was an extraordinarily articulate man, highly skilled in logic, debate, and intellectual argumentation. He used to travel from village to village, and he had tortured the entire region with his debates because nobody could defeat his logic. His central argument was that light does not exist at all, that the whole concept of light is a political and social fiction invented by cunning people to exploit the blind. Whenever people told him, "Look, we can see the light. The sun rises every morning and fills the world with color, and the dark night is illuminated by the stars," the blind philosopher would laugh arrogantly and say, "Bring your light to me. Let me touch it. What does it feel like? Is it hot or cold? Let me hear it. What kind of sound does it produce when it hits the earth? Beat it like a drum so my ears can capture its rhythm. Let me smell it. Does it have a fragrance? Let me taste it. Is it sweet or sour?" Now, light cannot be touched. It cannot be heard. It cannot be tasted, and it cannot be smelled. It can only be seen through the eyes. And the philosopher was completely blind. So when the villagers could not produce light through his other four senses, he would declare triumphantly, "See, you are all fools and hypocrites. Because you cannot prove the existence of light through any scientific experiment, it does not exist. Your eyes are nothing but a mass hallucination, a shared delusion." The villagers were completely helpless against his sophisticated logic. One day, they heard that Gautam Buddha had arrived in their village with his disciples. The villagers rejoiced and thought, "This is the perfect opportunity. We shall take this blind philosopher to Gautam Buddha. If Buddha cannot convince him, then nobody can, and it will be a spectacular intellectual debate to watch." They dragged the blind man to the mango grove, where Buddha was sitting in deep silence under a tree. The elders of the village stepped forward and said, "Master, we have brought this blind man to you. He is a great scholar, but he denies the existence of light, and he silences all our arguments because we cannot show him light through his touch or his hearing. Please, argue with him and prove to him that light is a reality." Gautam Buddha looked at the villagers with deep compassion, shook his head, and said, "You are all behaving very stupidly, and you are being completely cruel to this man. Light is not a subject for intellectual debate. logic cannot produce vision, and arguments cannot give sight to a blind eye. He is right in his own way, because for a blind man, light cannot and should not exist. His problem is not a problem of philosophy. His problem is a physical problem. You should not have brought him to a philosopher. You should have taken him to a physician. Buddha had his own personal physician, the great Jivaka, traveling with him in his caravan. Buddha called Jivaka and said, "I am moving on to the next village with my disciples, but you must remain here in this town. Do not follow me until you have completely cured this blind philosopher's eyes. Treat him with all your skill and compassion." Jivaka stayed behind, examined the man's eyes, and found that his blindness was due to a specific, delicate disease that could be cured through ancient medical surgery. He worked on the man's eyes for 6 months, applying rare herbs, treating the cataracts, and slowly the man's physical vision was restored. The day he opened his eyes for the first time, he saw the light, he saw the green trees, he saw the beautiful colors of the sunset, and he was completely overwhelmed with an ecstatic joy. He danced all the way to the next province where Gautam Buddha was staying, threw himself at Buddha's feet, wept tears of pure gratitude, and said, "Master, I am eternally grateful to you that you did not engage in a philosophical debate with me. Had you argued with me, I would have used my clever intellect to defend my blindness, and I would have remained blind for my entire life. You showed true compassion by realizing that light is not an argument. It is an experience, a vision that requires functioning eyes." This story has an immense, multidimensional significance. Your so-called scholars, your pundits, your theologians who go on arguing about God, about the soul, about reincarnation, about the afterlife, are exactly like that blind philosopher before his cure. They are playing with empty words, trying to comprehend the unknowable through the limited, limping instrument of the human intellect. But God is not an argument. The inner self is not a hypothesis, and your immortality is not a theory to be proven by logic. It is a direct, immediate vision that requires the opening of your inner eye, the eye of meditation, the third eye that looks inward instead of outward. As long as you live only through your physical senses, you will remain trapped in the world of duality, the world of change, the world where everything is born and dies. You will look at your body and be terrified of aging. You will look at your mind and be terrified of madness. And you will look at your life and be terrified of absolute annihilation. But the moment you learn the knack of turning your consciousness backward upon itself, when your attention drops from the head into the silent lake of your heart, You transcend the dual world completely. You enter into the field of the unmanifest, the eternal source from which everything arises and into which everything eventually returns. The Sufi mystic Jalaluddin Rumi wrote a beautiful line as his own epitaph, condensing his entire extraordinary life into just 3 words. I was raw, now I am cooked and burnt. These 3 words represent the 3 distinct stages of the inner spiritual journey. When you live identified with your ego, with your personality, cut off from the whole in your small, separate shell, you are completely raw. You are full of tensions, full of anxieties, full of fears, because a raw fruit cannot be at ease. It is hard, bitter, and constantly clinging to the branch out of fear of falling. When you come into contact with a master, when you enter into a school of meditation, you begin to warm up. The warmth of love, the fire of awareness starts operating on your frozen conditionings. Your icebergs begin to melt, your defenses start dropping, and you enter into a deep harmony with yourself and with nature. This is the second stage. You are being cooked. You become soft, sweet, fluid, and you are no longer a separate hard seed. You are ready to burst forth into thousands of beautiful flowers. And then comes the third, ultimate stage. You are burnt. The fire of awareness becomes so absolute, so intense, that not even a shadow of your separate identity is left behind. The seed is completely burnt. The salt man has dissolved entirely into the ocean. The drop has become the sea. In this state of total burning, there is no doer left, no experiencer left, only a pure space, a magnificent nothingness, an eternal presence remains. This is what Buddha calls nirvana, the ultimate extinguishing of the candle flame. When the flame is extinguished, do you ask, where has the flame gone? In which direction has it traveled? It has not gone anywhere. It has simply become one with the universal sky. It has become the whole. The path of the meditator, the path of Zen, is the path of purity, the via purgativa. It proceeds by absolute negation, by emptying the consciousness of all contents until only the pure sky remains. The pure man unites 2 in 1. The observer and the observed become a single emptiness. But the path of the Sufi, the path of the devotee, is the path of love, the via unitiva. It does not negate, it affirms, it welcomes, it overflows. The lover unites 3 in 1. The lover, the beloved, and love itself meet and dissolve into a spectacular cosmic trinity. It is an orgasmic unity with the entire existence, a state where you are so completely full of the beloved that you start dancing in absolute madness. singing a song that is not your own, a celestial melody that pours directly from the beyond. Both paths lead to the exact same ultimate realization, but their expressions are beautifully different. The inner being of a meditator becomes like a vast, silent, magnificent desert under a starry sky. The desert has an immense solitude, a cool, enormous peace, where nothing moves, nothing distracts, and all is utterly quiet. The inner being of a lover becomes like a blooming garden full of variety, full of green foliage, colorful flowers, birds singing, and streams of running water flowing joyously toward the sea. This is why Hakim Sanai has called his book The Walled Garden of Truth. He is a lover talking about his world of overflowing fulfillment. But whether you choose the silent desert of meditation or the ecstatic garden of love, remember the urgent warning of Hakim Sanai. I am frightened lest your ignorance and stupidity leave you stranded on the bridge. Every method of meditation, every experience of love is nothing but a bridge to take you to the other shore. A bridge is a beautiful help, and you should be deeply grateful to it, but you should not start building your house on the bridge. If you live on the bridge, you will remain stuck in a limbo, neither of this shore nor of that. The human mind is so stupidly cunning that it can turn even spiritual experiences into a new addiction, a new dependency. When you begin to meditate, extraordinary things will start happening in your bioenergy system. You will feel a powerful, cooling energy rising up your spine, opening your chakras, filling your consciousness with a spectacular, otherworldly ecstasy. A single moment of this inner energy movement is more gratifying than 1,000 physical sexual orgasms, and immediately the ego can come back from the secret door. It says, "Look, I have attained great spiritual heights. I am a siddha. I am an advanced meditator. My kundalini is rising." You become addicted to the pleasant experience. You start practicing it mechanically every day, and you get completely stranded on the bridge. The method has to be dropped the moment its work is complete. Buddha said that a spiritual method is exactly like a wooden raft. You use the raft to cross a wild, dangerous river, but once you have safely reached the other shore, you leave the raft by the side of the water and move into the country on your own feet. You don't carry the wooden raft on your head into the marketplace out of gratitude, saying, "This raft saved my life, so I shall carry it on my skull for the remainder of my days." If you do that, you are simply a fool. The medicine has to be abandoned the moment the illness is gone. If you continue taking the medicine, it becomes your new, more complex disease. Remember constantly that He is the provider of both faith and worldly goods. He is none other than the disposer of our lives. He is no tyrant. For everything He takes, He gives back 70-fold. And if He closes one door, He opens 10 others to you. He treasures you more than you do yourself. When old, tattered doors are closed in your life, when a relationship breaks, when money disappears, when your physical health fails, do not fall into a panic of despair. The old must be cleared away so that the new can enter your life. If you live with tunnel vision, focused only on the one closed door, you will remain blind to the 10 new doors that have opened all around you. Expand your vision, trust the process of existence, and know that the whole treasures your potential far more than your small ego ever can. Rise, have done with fairy tales, leave your base passions, and come to me, says Sanai. The priest has fed you on childish fairy tales for centuries just to keep you dependent on his institution. He has made a business out of God, a commercial market out of your fear of death. Drop all these fictions and face the naked reality of your base passions without any condemnation. Your anger, your sex energy, your greed are not your enemies. They are the very raw materials out of which your divinity will be sculpted. Do not repress them, do not fight with them, because in conflict your precious energy is dissipated. Absorb them, digest them through alert, silent watchfulness, and you will find that the base metal is automatically transformed into pure, radiant gold. You have to realize that it is His guidance that keeps you on the path and not your own strength. The moment you think it is your own strength that is making you spiritual, the ego has returned with a vengeance. Remain a humble, silent slave to the total flow of the universe, and in that very surrender, you will find that you have become the absolute king of existence. And when you allow yourself to settle deeply into this nothingness, a profound realization begins to dawn upon your consciousness. You cannot establish a perfect unity with existence if you are constantly fighting against your own inner reality. The greatest mistake human beings make is that they are always trying to choose between their qualities, accepting what looks beautiful and rejecting what looks ugly, hateful, or unworthy. But choice means division. Choice means you are creating a civil war within your own house, and a divided house is bound to remain in constant turmoil and anguish. If you feel cowardice, if you feel hypocrisy, if you feel miserliness inside your heart, your entire conditioning has taught you to immediately repress it, to wear a beautiful mask of bravery and holiness to hide your inner dirt from the eyes of the world. But by not looking at it, by pretending that it does not exist, do you think it simply disappears? It does not. It merely sinks deep into the dark basement of your unconscious mind, and from there it continues to manipulate your entire lifestyle in a very indirect, invisible, and dangerous way. If you truly want to be free from these chains, you must understand that the very desire to be free is the ultimate chain that keeps you unfree. Every desire is an imprisonment, and the spiritual desire to transform yourself into a saint or a Buddha is the greatest, most subtle greed that can trap the human soul. True transformation does not happen through effort. It does not happen by fighting against your nature. It happens only when you relax completely into that which is, whatsoever is, without any conditions, any judgment, or any condemnation. If you feel a deep cowardice within you, accept it with absolute joy and say to yourself, "This is my truth at this moment. I am a coward." The moment you accept your cowardice without any conflict, a miraculous change happens. Only a very brave person can have the immense guts to accept the bare fact that they are a coward. No coward can ever do that. By the very act of absolute acceptance, you have already transcended the cowardice and stepped onto the path of real integration. We must look closely at the structure of the human personality to understand how this massive deception has been created within us. As a child in your mother's womb, you existed in a state of absolute essence, rooted perfectly at the very center of your being. The child in the womb knows no separation, no boundary. He lives in a perfect state of unio mystica, completely one with the mother and with the entire universe. He has no ego yet, because the ego can arise only when you become aware of the other. But the moment the child comes out of the womb, he enters into a world that is deeply neurotic, fragmented, and artificial. The parents, the teachers, and the priests are in a tremendous hurry to impose layer upon layer of conditioning on his innocent consciousness. They cannot afford to let him remain raw and natural, because a natural individual can never be reduced to a submissive robot in a mechanical herd. So they immediately create a split within his soul, forcing his consciousness to shift from the essence to an artificial personality. If you examine a well-developed human personality through the eyes of deep psychology, you will find three distinct layers. The first layer is a very thin, positive surface, but it is utterly phony and false. This is the layer that the great psychologist Fritz Perls used to call the Eric Berne layer, the space where you play all your sophisticated social games, wearing appropriate masks for every occasion. On this phony surface, you go on smiling and being sweet to your neighbors, telling them how glad you are to see them, while deep down in your heart you are full of rage and you want to murder them. This thin skin of respectability is handed to you by your parents because they know that to survive in a funny society, you will need a funny lubricating agent. Otherwise, you will face constant conflict and exclusion. But if you scratch this phony positive layer just a little bit, you will immediately come across the second layer, which is negative but still completely false. This negative layer is much thicker and full of all the ugly, suppressed garbage that you have accumulated throughout your life, your anger, your jealousy, your lust, your cowardice, and your greed. Because this second layer is so heavy and dark, you are terrified to practice true meditation, because going inward means you will have to cross this dirty rubbish heap before you can reach your true center. This negative layer arises because when you were a child, the society continuously told you to repress your natural expressions. When you were angry, you were pure anger, which had a superb beauty and grace because of its totality. But the parents said, "Stop it. Anger is bad. A good boy does not get angry." So you repressed the anger to save your respectability, and that total, beautiful energy became a hard, toxic block within your system. Grown-up human beings have lost their intrinsic beauty and elegance because their totality has been completely destroyed by this division. They are always partial. When they love half-heartedly. When they are angry, they are only partially angry, always censoring themselves through the head. And because they are split, they are in a constant state of inner war, which is the source of all human misery and neurosis. When you sit in the presence of an energy field or a master, and your phony positive masks begin to slip away, you suddenly feel yourself to be shallow, false, and completely empty. It shocks you to realize that this is your face at the moment, and you feel a deep paranoia that there is nothing deeper inside your being. But I tell you, this shock is an immensely auspicious beginning, a moment of supreme blessings. To know that you are phony is the first fundamental step toward becoming real. The shallowness cannot know itself as shallow. Only a deep, intuitive awareness of depth can make you realize that your personality is shallow. Disease cannot feel itself as disease. Only the presence of health makes you aware of your illness. The very fact that you can observe your phoniness, your cowardice, and your hypocrisy means that you, the watcher, the observer, are completely separate from all of them. The observer is never the observed, and the looker is always beyond the object it looks at. This witnessing consciousness is your true center, your essence, which is arising out of the chaotic ruins of your false personality. This is the necessary sacrifice that every true seeker must make. The sacrifice of the phony on the sacred altar of the real. It is difficult for you to be silent because your entire separate identity, your ego, can exist only in noise. Noise is the essential food that keeps your ego thriving. It lives on it, it grows on it, and it cannot survive a single moment of absolute quietude. When you think about becoming silent, you have a very childish idea that when silence comes, your ego will be there to enjoy it and brag about it to others. But that is an absolute impossibility. When real silence descends upon your being, the separate I disappears completely. You and silence cannot coexist. You are the noise, and the arrival of silence is the absolute death of the ego. Sufis call this magnificent dissolution fana, the total extinguishing of the candle flame. All that you had known as your history, your name, your past, your prestige simply disappears, and only an infinite, empty canvas remains. Your mind is nothing but your past, a mechanical recording mechanism that goes on playing the same old records of histories which do not exist anymore. And you have to go into this past again and again, repeating your old habits and repeating your stories, because that is the only way you can nourish the fictional I. If you stop repeating your history, the ego will drop on its own accord due to absolute starvation. That is why you go on inventing your past, coloring it, polishing it, and turning it into a beautiful fairyland of golden childhood memories which never actually existed. Your childhood after the 4th year was not golden at all. It was a deeply painful time of mutilation, a time when you were being pushed and pulled violently into the social machine. But you retouched those memories because the ego needs a beautiful, grand past to support its present pretenses. Lies require a massive, efficient memory to be repeated continuously. Only truth can stand without any memory because it simply is. If you want to know what sannyas is, you cannot understand it from the outside through intellectual definitions. The proof of the pudding is always in its tasting. You have to take the plunge and taste its flavor on your own tongue. Sannyas is not a change of your outer garments. It is not a change of your name or your social status. It is a deep, interior rebellion that shakes you out of your mechanical sleep and connects you directly with your own eternal source of life energy. It is an experience so profound that no words can ever contain its meaning, and those who look at it from the outside will always find it completely incomprehensible and mad. They live a normal, sane life on the surface, but their sanity is nothing but a spiritual pygmyhood, a flat, drab existence that has never known the magnificent peaks of cosmic joy. When people drop their mundane activities and escape to a meditative space, the worldly crowd always calls them escapists. They are right, but they are right in a very beautiful sense of which they are completely unaware. There are two kinds of escapes in the world. You can either escape from reality or you can escape to reality. Moving into sannyas, moving into the inner silence of your being, is an escape to reality, because your inner center is the only real thing that exists within you. The crowd that is marching on the streets, protesting against atomic power, fighting for environmental protection, and shouting for democratic freedoms, is merely wrestling with the leaves of the tree without ever touching the roots. From where do atomic weapons come? From where does all this violence and destruction arise? It comes directly from the unresolved chaos of the human mind. Unless the human mind undergoes a radical inward mutation, you can destroy all the nuclear bombs today, and tomorrow the same ambitious, greedy mind will invent even more dangerous ways to destroy the earth. The pacifists who march for peace are full of a deep, unconscious rage and destructiveness. Their processions go on screaming and howling, and they frequently end in rioting, looting, and burning buses, because their peace is just a beautiful mask hiding their inner violence. All your historical wars have been fought in the name of peace. The politicians always prepare for war to protect the peace. This is an ancient, mechanical loop of human stupidity. We are not interested in that superficial nonsense here. We are cutting the very roots of the political mind by creating a completely new kind of human being who knows how to rejoice, how to love, and how to celebrate existence. Do not ask when you are going to understand, and do not ask how you are going to understand, because these are nothing but subtle strategies of the mind to postpone your awakening to the tomorrow. Understanding is not an object that can be manufactured through a mechanical technique. Understanding is already the case within you, but you are deliberately avoiding it because it threatens your life investments. You have spent your entire life accumulating a specific personality, and if you accept the bare truth of what I am saying, your entire past will turn into a useless dream. Your ego cannot swallow this liquidation. So it says, "Tell me the method, give me a discipline, show me the path so that I can practice it gradually, and through that how the future enters, and you are back in the old mechanical loop of postponement. You have understood me perfectly well this very moment, but you are terrified to act upon it because it requires immense daring. Courage does not mean a lack of fear. Courage simply means the readiness to risk the known for the unknown, to risk the safe and secure dream for the unsafe and roaring reality of existence. You have nothing to lose because you don't have anything real right now. You are just carrying rags and believing them to be royal robes. Why are you so attached to your rags? Drop your definitions, drop your shoulds and your oughts, and let yourself fall into the magnificent, uncultivated silence of this very moment. To move from sexuality to love, you must first understand the fundamental difference between sex and sexuality. Sex is an absolutely natural, beautiful, and innocent bioenergy function of life. Sexuality is an abnormal, cerebral pathology created by your head. When sex enters into your head through the door of fear or the door of repression, it turns into sexuality. The East has become sexual through the perversion of repression, creating sadomasochistic saints who are obsessively focused on sex while pretending to be against it. The West has become sexual through the perversion of greed, fantasizing about sex through pornography and glossy magazines, creating an illusory expectation that no real human being can ever fulfill. Both are deeply sick and out of touch with the natural wisdom of the body. The body is never your enemy. The body is always your most intimate friend, carrying an intrinsic intelligence that has been given to it by nature itself. If the body is ill, it naturally refuses food, but your head says, "Eat, otherwise you will become weak." If the body is sexually vibrant, it flows naturally, but your head brings in religious conditionings and says, "Repress it, it is a sin." This constant mechanical interference of the head turns your natural sex energy into a distorted, obsessive sexuality. There is no direct route from sexuality to love because sexuality lives in the head and love is an explosion of the heart center. You must first bring your sexuality back to the sex center, accepting it as an innocent, natural function of life, like hunger or thirst. When you live your sexual moments meditatively, with deep silence, tenderness, and celebration, without any guilt or division, sex naturally ripens and transforms into love. And one day, that same love ripens even further and becomes pure prayer, a cosmic attunement with the ultimate reality. Man functions entirely as a machine because he is completely unconscious moving through life as a programmed robot. Your acts are not acts at all. They are merely mechanical reactions to external stimuli based on your past habits. You say the same things to your woman. She reacts in the exact same predictable way. You counter-react, and the drama ends in the same domestic warfare every single day. This is the life of a machine. To become a true human being, you must learn the art of de-automatizing yourself. Sufis use specific, bizarre devices to shatter these mechanical loops. They tell you to do something completely contrary to your past habits, something that completely confounds your mechanical mind. If you are nervous, your mechanical habit is to walk fast. The Sufi says, walk as slowly as a snail and watch what happens. The mind is suddenly puzzled because it has no ready-made program for this behavior. It cannot supply an automated reaction, and in that shock, the mind drops and you fall into an intense state of awareness. That is the exact mechanism behind Zen, Tao, and Sufi devices. They create an absurd, unexpected situation that shatters your expectations and forces your consciousness to wake up from its mechanical slumber. A master is not here to fulfill your expectations. If he fulfills your expectations, he is helping you remain asleep. He is here to hit you hard, to shock your system, and to completely destroy your frozen character, so that your original face can bloom like a lotus out of the mud of your personality. Physical ugliness or beauty is a completely superficial matter. It has no existential value because the real thing always flows from within your interiority. If a person is physically beautiful but full of inner darkness, greed, and egoism, their beauty will soon look plastic, cold, and repulsive. But if an ordinary, so-called ugly person enters into deep meditation, a spectacular transformation happens to their physical vessel. As their tensions drop, as their defenses dissolve, and as their inner sky becomes clean and transparent, a new grace starts radiating from their eyes. They look luminous, they look relaxed like a child, and their entire presence becomes filled with an exquisite charm and magnetism. Do not waste your life trying to alter the outer shell through plastic surgery or cosmetic modifications. That will only create a more painful contrast with your inner poverty. Bring out the boundless beauty of your inner being through meditation, through love, and through dance, and the outer form will become completely immaterial. When the divine showers upon you from within, the clay of your body is entirely transfigured. The path of truth is not woven out of words or deeds. Only desolation can come from these, and never any lasting spiritual edifice. Your intellect is just a hodgepodge of guesswork and thought, limping over the face of the earth, trying helplessly to capture that which is limitless. Wherever thoughts are, God is not. The intellect can only move within the boundaries of its own creation. Whatever you assert about the ultimate nature of reality, you are bound to be completely out of your depth, like a blind man trying to describe the face of his own mother whom he has never seen. While reason is still tracked down the secret through logical syllogisms, the true seeker ends his quest on the open, sunlit field of love. Sweetness and life are the only true words of the man who treads this road in absolute silence. When he speaks, it is not from ignorance, and when he is silent, it is not from sloth. He has become a hollow bamboo, a clean, unblemished channel through which the divine melody can sing its eternal song into the universe. In order to accomplish this absolute unification of your consciousness, you must first learn the art of total disidentification from the mechanics of the mind. You have to understand that whatsoever can be observed within you is not you. You can observe your cowardice, you can observe your hypocrisy, you can observe your miserliness, and you can observe that deep, stubborn tendency toward privacy, which is nothing but an attempt of the ego to create a windowless castle of isolation. Because you can observe all of these tendencies, you are automatically separate from them. The looked at can never be the looker. The object of your awareness can never be your subjectivity itself. But the moment you notice these dark, hidden corners of your personality, you instantly get into a panic. Your mind starts screaming that you must fix them, that you must find a technique to get free from them, that you must transform your cowardice into bravery and your hypocrisy into absolute sincerity. This very desire to change yourself is the ultimate barrier to your transformation. The desire to be free is the very chain that keeps you tightly bound to your past conditioning. Every desire is an anchor that prevents your boat from moving into the open, uncharted sea of existence. When you desire to change your cowardice into bravery, what are you actually doing? You are creating a conflict within your own house. You are dividing your consciousness into two hostile camps. The real self that is currently experiencing cowardice and the ideal self that wants to be brave. In that division, your energy is completely dissipated and lost. You become a civil war, a battleground of endless shoulds and oughts. And through that inner conflict, your ego becomes even more crystallized, hard, and rigid. The ego thrives on conflict. It cannot survive a single moment of total, non-judgmental relaxation. Transformation does not happen through your willpower. It does not happen through your conscious efforts to improve yourself. It happens only when you are courageous enough to drop all goals, all ambitions, and relax completely into that which is, whatsoever is, right now, in this very moment. If you feel that you are a hypocrite, if you see past your beautiful, painted smile and realize that you are just playing social games to deceive others and protect your image, do not judge it. Do not say that this is bad. Do not condemn yourself, and do not try to become a saint. Simply look at the fact with complete clarity and say within yourself, I am a hypocrite. Live that truth with absolute intimacy. Do not create a distance between yourself and the fact. The moment your acceptance becomes unconditional, a supreme miracle takes place. Only a person of immense, extraordinary bravery can have the guts to look directly into their own eyes and accept the fact that they are a phony, a coward, or a hypocrite. No coward can ever do that. A coward will immediately close his eyes and find a beautiful religious excuse to cover up his reality. By the very act of absolute, non-judgmental acceptance, you have already transcended the lower quality. You have brought the light of awareness into the dark basement of your unconscious mind, and in that light, the old form falls away on its own accord. The energy that was locked up in your hypocrisy, in your defenses, in your armor, is suddenly released. It becomes available to you as a fresh, bubbling near of creativity, love, and joy. We must understand that this inner work is not an easy journey. It requires a deep, painful peel of your false identity. As you sit here with me, listening to these words, letting this silent vibration penetrate past your defenses, your false positive masks will start to slip away. You will suddenly look at yourself and feel incredibly shallow, false, and completely empty. You will feel a deep existential paranoia that there is absolutely nothing substantial inside your being. But I tell you, this shock is one of the most magnificent, auspicious moments of your life. To know that you are phony is the first fundamental step toward becoming real. The shallowness cannot know itself as shallow. Only the presence of a deeper awareness within you can reveal the superficial nature of your personality. Disease cannot feel itself as disease. Only the hidden presence of health can make you aware of your illness. The very fact that you can observe your own phoniness, your own miserliness, and your own greed means that you are completely separate from all of them. This witnessing consciousness is your true center, your eternal essence, which is arising out of the chaotic ruins of your false personality. This is the necessary sacrifice that each of you must make. The sacrifice of the phony on the sacred, silent altar of the real. If you feel this truth illuminating your inner world, if you understand that the time has come to drop your defenses and embrace your authentic space, let this communion expand throughout your existence. To participate in this silent revolution of human consciousness, to help this light reach the millions who are stumbling in absolute darkness and fear, take a moment to look at your screen. Express your love and alignment with this work by clicking the join button to become an essential pillar of our meditative space. Your presence as a member is a beautiful, direct contribution to the continuation of these teachings. If these insights have touched your heart today, if they have brought a sudden, silent relaxation to your long-suffering soul, you can also share your gratitude through the Super Thanks feature on your screen, creating a spontaneous, loving exchange of energy. For those who wish to explore these dimensions of your inner sky at your own pace, our collection of ebooks is always available to guide your unique pilgrimage into the unknown. Leave your comments below. Tell us what illusions you are ready to drop today. Share this video with those who are ready to wake up, and subscribe to this continuous near of pure awareness. You see, it is difficult for you to be silent because your entire separate identity can exist only in noise. The ego is nothing but the noise of your past thoughts, your past memories, and your social conditionings accumulated since your childhood. Noise is the essential nourishment that keeps your ego thriving. It cannot survive a single moment of absolute stillness. When you think about becoming silent, you have a very childish, greedy idea that when silence comes, your ego will be there to enjoy it and brag about it to others. But that is an absolute impossibility. When real silence descends upon your being, the separate I disappears completely. You and silence cannot coexist. You are the noise, and the arrival of silence is the absolute death of the ego. Sufis call this magnificent dissolution fana, the total extinguishing of the candle flame. All that you had known as your history, your name, your past, and your prestige simply disappears, and only an infinite, empty canvas remains. Your mind is nothing but your past, a mechanical recording mechanism that goes on playing the same old records of histories which do not exist anymore. And you have to go into this past again and again, repeating your old habits, your old complaints, and your old stories, because that is the only way you can nourish the fictional I. If you stop repeating your history, The ego will drop on its own accord due to absolute starvation. That is why you go on inventing your past, coloring it, polishing it, and turning it into a beautiful fairyland of golden childhood memories which never actually existed. The childhood that you remember after your 4th year was not golden at all. It was a deeply painful time of mutilation, a time when you were being pushed and pulled violently into the social machine. But you retouched those memories because the ego needs a beautiful, grand past to support its present pretenses. Lies require a massive, efficient memory to be repeated continuously. Only truth can stand without any memory because it simply is. When you drop this dead weight of the past, when you stop cooperating with the mechanical repetitions of your mind, you enter into a state of response instead of reaction. Reaction comes out of your past habits, but response comes out of the freshness of the present moment. Response is spontaneous, alive, and creative. It does not look for ready-made answers in the archives of memory. It simply looks at the reality face to face and acts out of pure awareness. The path of truth is not woven out of words or deeds. Only desolation can come from these, and never any lasting spiritual edifice. Your intellect is just a hodgepodge of guesswork and thought, limping over the face of the earth, trying helplessly to capture that which is limitless. Wherever thoughts are, God is not. The intellect can only move within the boundaries of its own creation. Whatever you assert about the ultimate nature of reality, you are bound to be completely out of your depth, like a blind man trying to describe the face of his own mother whom he has never seen. While reason is still tracking down the secret through logical syllogisms, the true seeker ends his quest on the open, sunlit field of love. Sweetness and life are the only true words of the man who treads this road in absolute silence. When he speaks, it is not from ignorance, and when he is silent, it is not from sloth. He has become a hollow bamboo, a clean, unblemished channel through which the divine melody can sing its eternal song into the universe. To live a life without any ideology, without any ready-made conclusions of how to be, is the beginning of true sanity. The world is full of political and religious ideologies, and all of them have brought nothing but violence, division, and war to humanity. A religious person lives without any ideology, without any dogmas or systems of thought. He simply lives, responding to reality moment to moment from his own interiority. He is a mirror that reflects whatsoever is present before it without any prejudice or choice. An ugly man comes, the mirror reflects him. A beautiful man comes, The mirror reflects him. The mirror has no choice. It has no preference. It simply remains silent and clear. When you drop all your preferences, when you stop choosing between your qualities, your inner division disappears completely. You become crystallized, integrated, and centered. You are no longer a fragmented crowd of hostile voices. You become one. And this oneness is the ultimate destination of your long human pilgrimage. It is a state where sex has been beautifully transformed into love, and love has ripened into pure prayer. It is a state where you are so completely full of the divine presence that you start overflowing with joy, sharing your light with anyone who is ready to receive it. You do not look at the other as a need. You do not use the other to escape from your own loneliness, and you do not reduce the other to a possession or a slave. You can simply look at the other and say, I do not need you, I love you. In this freedom, love becomes a magnificent celebration, an ecstatic dance of two emptinesses overlapping in the same space. Do not be afraid of your aloneness, and do not be afraid of the deep, bottomless pit of nothingness that opens up within you during meditation. That nothingness is your original face, your essential nature, which can never be born and can never die. It is the empty sky that holds the entire universe within its embrace. Drop your armor, let your defenses dissolve completely, and look at the world with the innocent, wonder-filled eyes of a newborn child. Accept your physical body with deep gratitude. Fall in love with its natural wisdom, and let your consciousness spread and stream through every single cell of your being. Live each ordinary day with a great, clear enthusiasm, making a sacred sacrament out of small things like eating your breakfast, taking a bath, or walking on the earth. When you live with this total unforced mindfulness, death ceases to be a tragedy or an enemy. It becomes the final beautiful culmination of your ripening process, a glorious date with the divine. You can find our ebook titled The Hidden Energy Protocol, Reclaim Your God Mode, in the description below to continue your journey into ultimate liberation.